Stop! Stop! I gotta do this. Here we go.
Wait,
everyone.
I'm sorry, Luke. This is
God.
wait. Sorry,
Shayne.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Can we have to say? Can we say who's talking before they talk? I think I'm gonna get really confused on who's talking, and I want to make sure I understand. What's
Yeah, like in the
No.
Keep up,
podcast.
get out.
No, seriously, in the podcast, say, hey, this is
No,
Josh.
there's just
and
a
talk.
lot of people, and
I'm not
I
gonna
feel
know
like
who you
this
guys are.
conversation is gonna get all over the place at some point. So
I don't disagree with them. It's a good idea.
I'm not gonna say my name.
We're gonna
Then no one will know who you are, Luke, and your opinion. Actually, that might work out for you. Actually, don't say your name.
That's right. Then it's like, wait, who said that horrible thing? And it's like, nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys.
Whatever. You don't have to, but
I don't want to like
I
the whole
agree.
podcast be like, hey, this is Josh speaking.
I do.
No, I don't.
Well, then I'm out.
You just leave.
well, whatever.
Guys, okay, we got to start. Doesn't matter. It's up to you guys. I'll leave that up to you guys if you want to do it. So here we go. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the 72nd episode of We're All in the Same Boat. I'm your host, Luke Roxwold, and today I'm here with a lot of people. Shayne.
I was okay. I was really hoping not to be first. No, I was just hoping not to be first, but it's okay. Hey guys, what's up?
Dropped the ball on that one. And Nick.
What's up?
This is horrible. Michael.
Hi, this is Michael. This is what my voice sounds like.
Michael's back. Woo!
Josh.
Greetings.
Jordan.
Live long and prosper.
And Andrew.
Hello.
As always, you can check us out on Instagram at WAITSB Podcast. This episode is going to be insane because we have so many more people than we've ever had, and it's the most complicated topic we've ever talked about. But you can check us out on Instagram, like I said, WAITSB Podcast, and you can go to iTunes and search for us. We're all in the same boat, and leave us a review by hitting 5 stars. That would be splendid. Gentlemen, all of you, all 7 of you,
Hey,
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
man.
So I have a
7?
question.
Oh no, it's 6. Sorry, 6 of you. It's 7 of us.
'Cause
Yeah,
you're 7.
Shayne.
I have a question. I believe Josh said in his intro to live long and prosper. I just have a question. What happens if I don't do that?
That was Jordan.
First of all,
Jordan.
that was
Okay,
Jordan.
Jordan.
First of all,
Sorry,
you're not
Jordan.
logical.
Names.
Second of all, you're
Names.
inferior.
Wait, I just heard the inferior part. What was the first one?
First of all, you're not logical. Second of all, you're inferior.
Man,
Oh.
it's rough.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because you won't
Yeah.
live long.
Prosper and live long, people. You heard the man.
No. If you don't live long and prosper, it was not predetermined that you would.
Oh no.
No.
Oh no.
It's not your fault.
We're getting
So the topic
started.
today is predestination versus free will, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, this
Segue.
episode is tying into our last episode, which you should check out. It was really well received. Andrew,
Orson.
who is this is his first episode,
It is.
really liked it. Andrew, why don't you tell the audience listening to this episode what you thought of the last episode so that we can get more listens?
Well, you started talking about politics and then theology, and I just had so much to say and wasn't a part of it. So I did like it, but I also was kind of bummed out that I wasn't a part of it. So
Yeah, I had multiple people tell me, "Oh, I was listening to the podcast and the entire time I was like yelling at my
Yes.
radio like I want to participate in this." And so,
Participate. Come on the podcast.
yeah,
Do it.
honestly, you could follow us on Instagram and then you can message us. That's basically what Andrew did.
yeah.
He just messaged us and was like, "Hey, I really want to be on the next episode."
See? The system
When we get
works, guys.
famous.
And now
Follow us
he's
on Instagram.
famous. See?
Oh wow.
Boom.
Congratulations, man.
He's gotten 2 more followers on Instagram because of this. So.
So the topic for today is predestination, determinism, versus free will. And we're going to kind of cover this topic from a bunch of different angles, some of which have to do with if there is a God, is he predestining who's going to go to heaven? Or is it our works, like our free will, that kind of gets us into heaven? And if there's no God, then is everything determinism or is it free will, and how does that work? And so is one possible and the other not, and just the inner workings of the most complicated topic we could have possibly picked. And then we said, let's get 3 people, from what I understand, that are on more of the side of free will, and then 3 people that are more on the side of predestination, and one of the people here is a pastor.
Hey.
It's not Michael.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. I need to figure out how to start this. I just have a boatload of notes.
I have a
Well,
question
I think what is the
narrow it
reason why
down.
you wanted to talk about this? You should start with that. What is the reason why we're all here? Why are we having this conversation?
Yeah,
Why
so
is it
what happened in the
important to
last
culture?
episode, Jordan? What were we talking about that led us into karma, wasn't it?
Yep,
Yeah.
it was karma, and then that segued into whether or not we make our own choices, or the universe, or God, or someone else has those choices presented to us, and then we can just react to them. So that's pretty much how it got started, and it turned into a can of worms that's just blooming as it goes.
I think it
Really
happened
like
at the
how we
very
react to
end
our
too.
environment too.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
And it happened at the very end of the episode too. It was like, all right,
keep
let's wrap
going.
up this episode.
No,
and then
we should-
Jordan
no,
was
no,
like,
no.
yo, we should
It's
talk
good that
about.
we didn't keep going.
This could have been your first 3-hour podcast, and you ruined
I
it.
was
I know. could've
very
been my-
tired that day, and I was like, "Get me out of here."
Yeah, it's funny because you can tell as the podcast goes along, Shayne talks less and less and less. He's like, I'm done.
I was just like, "It was a long day. Like, I'm tired."
Long day, long episode.
I've
So-
said my piece.
If I was to ask you guys whether you believe in free will or predestination, could you give me a definite answer? Is there anyone here who could not give me a definite answer for
before
which
that,
one you
Luke, I
believe?
just want to say something real quick, like, because there's 2 different answers if you're talking about like religiously or philosophically. I just want to throw that out there because
What's the
theologically,
difference?
Why should they be separate? Yeah.
Well, because there's different. I mean, you have like totally different set of like evidence and like things
But
you
that
have to
all
consider
goes
because
into one. Oh.
like because if there's no God, for example, I'm not trying to bring in the does God exist thing, but if there's no God, then it has a lot less weight because we're predetermined. That kind of sucks, but like, hey, we're just in the universe living our lives. But if there is a God and it's predetermined who goes to heaven or hell, then it's like, oh man, is God evil?
Well,
Does he like hate people they put
I
To
don't
make
down?
this really,
that-
really simple,
I don't-
guys, keep it, say what you believe, and then if it's in a religious context or a theological context.
Well, no. I don't think it's.
No?
I don't think they're 2 separate things. I feel like
No.
that all just leads you to your
No.
own perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it just matters differently.
It doesn't
one way or the
matter. I
other.
don't think it matters. Like, if
So
you have a
you're
religious
saying that like
perspective-
you're saying that free will and predestination have different, or I like saying determinism. I don't like saying predestination because I feel like predestination doesn't really exist outside of religion, and we're going to tackle this outside of religion as well.
Okay.
So I say determinism.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason I'm saying that is because if, like, as a Christian, if predestination exists, then it totally changes everything I believe. Like, it would
But-
shake it.
but
But
you-
outside
but-
of that, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
But okay,
use
well,
use
it's
use
a totally
deter-
different conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a huge conversation. That's why
Yeah.
I was-
Let's do this then. So it sounds like you're saying. So what you're saying is, Michael.
yeah, to simplify it.
It sounds like you're saying that within religion, it has a different context than it does outside of religion. Like there's the
Yes.
spiritual side and like the scientific side. And
Yeah.
and I agree actually because I do think that they kind of differ a little bit. So, but let's just have like what Jordan said. I'm gonna go through you guys.
Yeah, I just wanna throw
and
that out there.
Does anyone not know? Does anyone not have a definite belief between I almost said predetermination. I almost said predetermination, Will.
Predetermination, the will.
I keep saying pre-will and free destination. All right. Anybody?
No, I don't.
Mine's a little
I don't-
complicated.
Yeah, mine. I'm not like on either end. I have like my own kind of thought.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Then let's do this. Andrew, you're
Yes.
the new one. What's your belief?
Well,
Short answer, though.
okay.
Sorry.
We'll get into
I
it
would-
later.
I would have to say predestination and free will is like which one's right, which one's true is a biblical context for me. Like predestination is in the Bible. Like you can't say that's not real and it's free will. I think the argument is what does it mean, or then is it predestined or not?
Mhm. So you are predestination, but you think
Yes.
that the way that people use the word might differ a little bit.
Yeah, I think you can't just say predestination is not a thing because it's clearly stated, at least biblically.
Yeah.
It's also,
I think
it's
the
weird
argument-
because free will is the same way, where it's like it kind of depends on how you're defining the words, which we
Yeah.
will get into, but officially you're predestination.
Yes.
Okay. Jordan.
I'm caught in the middle. I thought I was free will, and then after a little bit of research on both subjects, I'm pretty much stuck in the middle because it seems like if you're talking about a biblical context, predetermination is definitely a thing. I mean, it's stated, it's in there, it's pretty clear, but there's also a ton of free will choices that are made that affect the outcome of situations. So, and then on the non-biblical context, we're reacting to everything in our environment, right? Too hot, too cold, hungry, not hungry, partners we pick. That's choices, but you're also reacting to your needs, wants, and desires. And then that leads into biology, that leads into everything interacting with each other. So you can say, well, I guess that's predetermined that I'm going to be hungry, but I also have a free will not to eat. But, you know, at the same time, you're probably going to eat.
Right.
So I kind of lie in
Josh.
the middle.
Yeah, okay. So, like I said, I'm trying to keep it short. That's not, you did fine. I'm just going to say, like, okay, cool. Next, Josh. Josh, what do you think?
I'm pretty much in the same boat in terms of.
We all are.
Oh, no.
Got him.
I believe that biblically speaking, there is evidence for both God choosing and God determining things by his own sovereign decree, but there's also evidence of humanity. And so my kind of bottom line is God sovereignly created us to have free will. How that works, I don't think
But then that, I would
fully understand, but
wouldn't that say
it
that is
exists.
free will?
Who knows?
Like if it's like, oh, God made free will, isn't that technically free will then?
No, so that's what I was saying. I was like, both exist. God determining things exists by his sovereign decree, and we have free will exists. We don't know how that works, but that it exists and that it works is the bottom line.
Okay. Anything else? Or Michael?
It's complicated. So it is. Really
Everyone's
complicated.
answer is like, I don't know.
I mean, because there even I was talking to someone about this the other day. Like, I know what I prefer, and I know like what has the most evidence, but they don't really like. I don't know. There's no like full answer. But basically, like, bottom line is, I believe in free will. I kind of prefer free will, but there is a lot of stuff in the Bible about predestination. But I think that stuff might be, like you said earlier, like not defined the same way that we're defining predestination.
Mm.
That's all I have to say right now.
Nick, what about you, Nick?
Yeah, mine's complicated too.
Man.
It's complicated, Luke.
I think
Like,
I
on
expect
the-
everyone to have simple answers for this complicated topic. I don't think I'm
I think
asking that much.
I think that we have free will, but because God's all-knowing, he can put things in front of us that he has a level of certainty of which direction we will take with that being in front of us. So he can kind of, it's not really that he's controlling our destiny, but he's putting things in front of us that he knows, will make a specific decision and go a certain way.
So, like, okay, interesting. All right, Shayne, what about you?
The best way for me to explain is I'm gonna use my favorite video game as reference. And
Kingdom Hearts.
There's a lot of
Yes.
theological questions in that game for sure.
honestly,
Like,
that's
not
why I
even
love
joking.
it. But yeah, so it's like at Kingdom Hearts at the beginning, you have a choice to make between the shield, the sword, and the staff. And even though everyone picks the sword, which is a stupid decision, but they all like you're making a choice to pick one of the three things that have a path set for you, like already in place. So I personally believe it's like a mix of the two, and they kind of work together. Like, I do think that things are predestined, but we're also presented with the choice to kind of, I guess, whatever path is going to kind of get us there. Because I do think we kind of end up in the place we're supposed to end up, but it's just kind of how we get to that place, I think.
So we'll start off by saying this.
But
Everyone...
I also think that
Okay.
no, I was gonna say I also just think this is not something that we're supposed to really know the definite answer to. So
That's okay. We're gonna solve it today.
Yeah. We're at the end of this podcast.
We
Everyone's going to
solve
know
the truth.
the meaning of life. Okay, hold up. Everyone, for the most part, just said, yeah, I don't really know. It's complicated. So I was like, I thought everyone had sides, and everyone was like, it's kind of weird.
I gave you my clear thing. Mine's not weird. Mine is a definite. I just think it's a mix of the two. I'm pretty dead set on that.
Well, everyone said both or it's complicated. Most people said kind of both, I think.
Yeah.
What about you, Luke? What's your one sentence answer?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's complicated. Both.
There it is. There it is.
If a God does not exist, I think it's impossible to have free will. And I got into a debate with someone about that just recently, because like it's just not possible. I don't know how free will could technically exist without a God, unless you redefine free will. You know, like you could use the word to mean different things, I think. If a God does exist, I think I believe in free will, because I just don't know how a God could do predestination. I don't know how. It seems heartless to me in a way. Like, if I'm being brutally honest, you know, if a God had predestination, it's like you're gonna choose the people who are gonna end up one place and choose the ones that are gonna end up somewhere else. So
Yeah.
So I tend to move more towards free will because it makes more sense to me in that context. So, okay.
Well, if a God made both, then didn't he determine if free will? He's going to give you free will, making that a predestination.
Well, that's the other catch-22. Is it's like, if he gives you free will, but he knows what you're going to do, is that really free will?
So actually, I have a good.
Yeah,
wanna talk about
I
that.
can understand that. I've
So what you guys talked about last week. One of y'all said something about like, and he even said just now about like, if you're hungry, and
That was me.
like, yeah, who are you again?
Jordan.
Jordan, hey
My name
man.
next time. I wasn't in school, all right? I was homeschooled. I forgot.
That was also no, but like, just because
Sorry.
someone forced you to do something doesn't mean you don't have the free will to do it. Like, I feel like that's people are combining the two. I don't think they're the same. Like, if someone has a gun to my head and is like, you need to go do this thing, like take money out of the ATM and give it to me, like, I still have free will to do it. They're forcing me to do something, but they're not like controlling my body or my like destiny in that moment. So I think it is a little bit different. Same thing with like determinism. Like, you're reacting to things that are happening to you. Unless you're just a robot, like, you still have free will. But if, like, for instance, I know if I say certain things to Luke, he'll react a certain way just because I know him real well. I'm not making him do these things. I'm not like orchestrating his life for him, but I just know him, right?
You're manipulating his actions.
Yeah, but not in a way that like he has no power over.
Michael just goes, yeah.
It's not. It's not coercion, is what he's saying. It's not coercion.
Yeah, it's not anything more than just saying like, if you don't do this, I'll do this, and he wants the result that he's acting for. So, or
So are we arguing
whether it's favorable or not.
for cause and effect or against cause and effect?
I think cause and effect is just different than predestination.
Well,
and
cause and
what we're
effect
talking
is
about.
like hard determinism.
Yeah.
Cause
Exactly.
and there's a couple different branches. I was doing some research on it, and there's if it's determinism or free will, like, let's say, so there's a bunch of different branches because everything in the world is always complicated, but there's like free will, determinism, or like libertarianism, determinism, or something like that.
What?
Libertarianism.
And then there's there's compatibilism, determinism, hard determinism, libertarianism, incompatibilism, hard incompatibilism. So it's like they're different levels. So some people say everything is predestined and nothing is free will. Some people say some things are predestined and other things are free will. And then some people say, is there one that's all free will? Libertarianism, I think, is all free will.
Yeah, it's like
or
it's like
metaphysical
anyone can choose
libertarianism.
anything, or they can change at any time.
Yeah, it's metaphysical libertarianism is determinism is false and free will is possible. There's a lot on this topic, you guys.
A lot of isms.
There's a lot of isms.
I think I should write down my notes. I was trying to do that while we were talking. Hopefully I can
It's
do
our
that.
job to solve this dilemma.
Yeah.
Yeah, today.
By the end of this podcast, everyone. will
That's
know the
way
answer.
too much pressure, and
We've
don't
solved
wanna be
racism.
involved.
We've solved sexism.
No.
We're gonna
We
solve.
solved gun
No.
control.
No,
We solved,
we-
we
we
solved karma
titled-
last week.
We titled episodes that we solved, but we have not actually solved them. We are not
Hey, the
saying
internet
that
why
we've
we
solved
solved
says that we've
anything.
solved them.
I'm not in that boat. I'm.
Well, we're all in the same boat.
We claim.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. Shane, you're either in the boat or not.
I'm currently hanging off the side of the boat with like a long piece of rope. That's just attached.
All right, who's got the knife? I'm cutting the rope.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Alright, let's get into
so
this.
yeah, let's just freestyle. Like, I have a lot written down, but I don't want to just read it to you guys, especially considering the last couple episodes I've gotten into a lot of rants. I would rather other people talk a little bit more this episode.
Luke.
Okay. It's like, let me ask you a question and have you answer it.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you.
All right.
In your statement about it has to be free will if there's a God, because he wouldn't be a good God if he sends people to hell.
I'm leaning more towards that, yeah.
I guess my question would be, what's the point of hell then? Why
In
does
the
hell
God.
exist anyway?
So let's address this question to everyone. So you're asking, well, I mean, you
I mean,
You should address the question to everyone.
that's
best.
okay. I'm sorry.
You're saying if there's a
This is
hell,
dangerous.
I just don't want. Yeah, I know, because Jordan
If-
knows if
if-
it starts going to my opinions, it'll never end.
No, he's
so
not
hold up.
kidding.
I'll
So
answer
you're
after you.
asking if free will exists, why does hell exist? Or if predestination?
I'm
what are you asking exactly?
I'm asking, why does hell exist?
In terms of the biblical sense,
Yes.
it's where the bad people go.
Yikes.
The non-believers.
So
I'm trying to think of how what
not
you're asking
believers.
exactly. Or like, I
guess
know
I'm
what you're
asking-
asking, but why?
yeah.
It's where the bad people go.
I think it's saying well, you're saying, Luke, if there is a God, you can't see how it would be predestined, because then people will be predestined to go to hell. But you
Right.
you
It'd
go
be like
to hell
I'm
if you
creating
don't-
this person knowing that I'm eventually
exactly.
going to send
and
them to hell.
you go to hell if you don't, if Jesus isn't your savior, you're gonna go to hell. So it's like you have to make that choice to do that. So like it's not in that sense that can't be predestined, because we have to make the choice to
It'd be like building a
Accept.
racetrack into a furnace and then putting my Hot Wheel car
Yeah.
down it. It's like,
I can
I
kinda-
made the car do that. Why did I? What was
Yeah.
the point?
So
Yeah.
I actually Luke. I didn't want to get into it so early, but
So
feel
I
the same
think
way.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so like this is the problem I have with Calvinism or predestination or whatever, like in the religious context, because so yeah, in the Bible it talks a lot about the elect and like God's chosen people concerning the Israelites, and then in Romans it talks about the elect with the Gentiles, and there's lots of ways you can look at that. Like one way I think that's in a video, this is the chat, as like the elect is talking about how the before the Jews were God's chosen people, but now the Gentiles are also part of that. Like it's more of a broad sense, like you are the elect. Everyone who accepts Christ is the elect. But at the same time, there's a lot, because it also says
Yeah, but
like
what
Jesus,
happened to
like,
the people
God-
before that, though?
that I don't even want to talk about that. That makes me sad. But like, what I'm trying to say is, so yeah, so for me, when I'm looking at this, there's
It's
a lot
like,
of
thank
evidence
God I
for-
wasn't born in before Christ,
Dude, you're getting
because
like,
I'm not a
that's
Jew. You know,
Like,
like
that's
so.
a
I feel exactly the
conversation.
same, because like yeah, I feel that. But so what I'm trying to say is, so God is love, and the Bible says that God is love. And the Bible also says that it also has some things that lean towards predestination. But to me, I don't think that like hard predestination where God chooses who does and who doesn't go to heaven can be true if God is love, because that would be like if say you have a brother and your dad locks your brother in his room all day, making him listen to like really bad radio country pop, and you're able to go outside to go to like Disney World every single day. And you're like, oh man, my dad loves me so much, he like lets me do all this stuff. No, your dad sucks because he's like making your brother like suffer in his room all day. Like no matter how good he's being to you, like no matter how much you go to heaven, whatever. Like he's not a good father in that sense. And to me,
Right.
I don't think a God can be loving and predestined people in that way.
Right. That's kind of what I'm saying.
And so,
Andrew,
and
do you
just-
or anybody,
just-
anyone jump in and because
just
this
to-
is
just to
interesting.
just to jump off Mike's comment, because I've burrowed my nose down the Calvinistic theology hole quite a ways.
Josh is the pastor, by the way.
And just
Has a
to
master's degree.
and just to go off of his point, everything he just said, I'm very much like along the same lines as one of the biggest problems I have with Calvinistic theology. But I would tell you, and Michael probably know this, and many of you may know this as well, that if you bring that up, the response you're going to get is, who are you to question an almighty sovereign God? Which is like the most frustrating answer, because you're just
Yeah,
like,
because it's a cop-out.
You just played the God card, and it's like,
Literally.
okay. You know,
Yeah,
it's
because
like,
that's so irritating, because it's like, when has that ever been an acceptable answer to anything? Like, oh, I'm trying to cure this disease. How dare you try to figure out science and the way the world works? And it's like, that's not a good answer. Now, we might not be able to figure this out. Actually, I'm sorry. At the end of this episode, we will have this figured out. Just you wait.
positive.
Absolutely.
But I mean, like,
why
we might
God
not be able
brought
to
us here.
figure this out, but
is our destiny.
I still think God would want us to wonder. And the thing is, if you're trying to get someone to follow Christianity, they're going to ask this question. So that's why I don't really feel bad about not holding back on this stuff, because I'm like, people got to be able to answer these questions. Because people are asking.
No,
I
it's true.
do understand though that if I like, for me, even though like it really bothers me to not understand things like this, I also know that God is an infinite being that I can't understand, so I don't have to understand it. Like I'm not going to be deterred because of that, but it is frustrating.
That is why I love the Eastern Orthodox Church. The way that it was described to me, I don't know a whole lot about them, but like, we in the West love to find out answers, and if we can't find answers to something, we just kind of blow it off and like, well, we either A, this is frivolous, so I'm not going to keep going with it, or B, because I can't prove it, or because I can't find the exact answer to it, I'm not going to believe in it. Whereas people in the East are very much into the mystery of God, the mysteries that we can't understand. And so the Eastern Orthodox Church is very much into, hey, we don't really understand how this works, and that's the mystery of God, and it is awesome that God
it's
is
beautiful,
mysterious.
but it also sounds kind of foolish though.
I was going to say that this podcast is not an Eastern Orthodox podcast.
No, I understand that. I'm just talking about for myself. I think there's a lot of benefit to be able to sit back and say, you know what? If I put God in a box, he's no longer God.
Right. That's the thing.
So if I can have an understanding of God, and there are some things that I don't understand about God, and I'm totally okay with that, I think there's a lot of benefit to that. Not saying that you don't continue to search for truth or search for meaning or whatever in that situation, but also just saying, you know what? God is way bigger than what I can understand, and God is way bigger than what I can, fully comprehend, and that's a good thing.
I mean,
That's really a good
to not
thing.
know is good.
Yeah, and I can agree with a lot of that. I got into a debate with an atheist about, well, maybe, I guess he was more agnostic about this, where he was like, I only believe things that science can prove, and if science can't prove it, then it doesn't exist. And it's like, okay, hold up. So that's the scope of science. So it doesn't make sense, because if a God exists, just given the premise of all this, if a God exists, he created science. So why would you try to prove God with something he created? And this is the example I use. If I painted a picture that was black and white, and then someone walked up and was like looking at the picture and then looked at me and then looked at the picture and looked at me and was like, Luke, you don't exist. And I was like, wait, but why? And they're like, because everything in this photo is black and white and you're not, so you can't exist. And it's like,
that's a good
well,
point.
I made the photo. Like, what does it, why would I have to follow the rules? And so that's the idea that I won't be able to fully understand God
Yeah.
is kind of expected, but I should still try to figure out as much as I can, because me going up to someone who doesn't believe and going, oh, you just won't understand.
The idea of only believing things science can prove is silly anyway, because there was a time where gravity wasn't proven, and like
we discover things every day.
Yeah.
yeah.
Dude, don't jump off of that thing.
You're
Why?
telling me that
It's gravity.
microscopic
We don't know.
organisms can kill me? What's a microscopic organism again?
That's right.
Like, people used to kill people for having health treatments. We burned them at stakes. So yeah, you can't always take everything that we know now as absolute fact.
Yeah,
in 5 years we go, oh, it's wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, science is kind of bound by time a little bit, I think.
It's also
A little
like
bit.
it's also super simple things that science can't prove, like music. Like music is so transcendent. Like you can't be like, oh, music makes you feel this way. No, it doesn't. Like science can't prove that. It's like
You can try to do it, but it's not how it works. Yeah,
there's a lot of things.
there's
That's
so
good.
many things.
You could probably look at brainwaves and figure it out, like
Yeah,
eventually.
as you say, music does have science behind it, though.
Yeah, but it's also super subjective. It
Lies.
doesn't work the
Not
same
good
everywhere.
music.
Anyway,
Lies.
What?
Well, so
I don't
like
think
so
the music science doesn't do a good job of explaining why, though. It just explains what.
Well, it's patterns. It's mathematics.
Well, no.
Oh,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
let's
Yeah, but
move
it
on.
It's
Let's
doesn't-
have a
like
deeper
music
conversation.
is like OCD with sound.
Music is mathematic, but it's also not, because
But
the
there's
same
no-
the same patterns don't work in every context, even in similar contexts.
No, but
I mean,
even
there's
those
no
contexts are
explanation for
mathematical.
Good music.
It is
no-
very mathematical.
But there's no explanation as to like why I prefer a certain tone on my guitar that others don't,
Yep.
or why I prefer a certain genre.
No, science can
Well, that
explain
could be
You can
nurture.
explain that.
That's neurochemical.
Yeah, I was saying that's nurture. That's like over
Anyway,
time.
but also that's different. Let's move on. I don't want to get sucked in.
Yeah, that's like really weird.
That's a rabbit
actually.
hole.
So can free will exist without a god? Does anyone disagree with me on that?
Can free will
Well,
I
isn't
think-
free will
I
chaos,
think it
though?
can exist without a god.
Well, that's
I
the question.
think-
Free will
I don't
without a
think
god.
they
Free will
can.
chaos.
I think
So-
free will without a god would be chaos.
So there's
think it makes
actually
sense.
a
We can't
great
be in
video.
control.
There's actually a great video on this by Prager University that did this, and they make the case that no, there can't be free will without a god. I would put it to you this way, and I listened to a lot of YouTube videos leading up to this. There was a great one by Jordan Peterson. He was responding to Sam Harris. Oh, Sam Harris.
No, not that
and-
debate.
I have a
Jordan-
Sam Harris video referenced in this. My notes,
So
actually.
so Jordan Peterson. So Jordan, it was actually I can give it to you, or I can just say which one it was in.
Just tell us what was in the video. You can show us later.
It was one of his lectures. You can look it up. It's Jordan Peterson, Determinism versus Free Will, and it's a classroom lecture. And he's talking about, and of course, Jordan Peterson lecture, he's using an old Disney film for his example, but it's Pinocchio. And he goes, hey, so in the scientific world, when we think about determinism versus free will, there's two things that take into account always, and only two, nature and culture. So not nature versus nurture, nature and culture. And that's Sam Harris's point, that we are all born into a world with things that we didn't choose, nor can we control. We're born into a family we didn't choose. We're born with characteristics we didn't choose. We're born with biological things that we didn't choose. All of these things, and because we didn't choose those things, and it's these things that impact what we do, therefore we don't have free will. Jordan Peterson's point, though, is to say that all of the philosophers and writers of antiquity, all the way up to now, all assume the same thing, and that there's a third object that science misses. And it's the third thing that science misses because they can't prove it and they can't explain it, which goes back to what we were talking about before. So they would agree there's nature, there's culture, but then there's self, there's consciousness. And it's that consciousness that gives us free will, because, and then he uses the example of a game, like a game of chess. There are rules within the game of chess that you didn't choose, that you just inherited, that, if you're going to play the game of chess, you inherit these rules. But within that box, within that board of rules and everything else, there's almost an infinite number of things that you can do within that set of rules that you do freely and that aren't determined or free will. And so I think that's a great image,
Analogy,
illustration of
So
those things.
it's an interesting image, but I like Peterson. I've said that before, but I don't really think it's a good example. Because I saw that video, and he's explaining compatibilism, which is determinism with parts of free will. So it's almost like physical objects have determinism to them, but then things with a conscience or a mind has free will. So if what was the example that I found? It's like the universe is the law, but some of our human actions are free. So if I'm hungry, that's not free will, that's determinism. But if I make a choice to say something or to do something, then that's free will. However, I don't agree with that, because I think that just scientifically looking at this, everything that you do is chemical reactions to reactions to reactions to reactions to reactions, and then it keeps going until you get back to the Big Bang. And that's just like scientifically, it's all one. We're like a giant explosion
except in
of
how
things ricocheting.
except in the reality that we all live in. Like everything around us and everything that we do is predicated off the idea of conscious self and free will. We don't act like automatons. We don't act like now, you can, well, do you know if you're determined? But I'm just like, seriously, like looking around at things and how we create our culture, how we interact with one another and things like that. We treat each other consciously like you're talking to someone with a self, someone with, you could use the word soul, I guess. You treat someone that way. And the great example of this, obviously, is the judicial system. The judicial system treats people like you have free will, and because you have free will, you're responsible for your actions as opposed to you're determined, and therefore you're not really responsible for your actions because you were predetermined to do what you've done.
Yeah, but if I looked at a computer program, by the way, anyone jump in, like you got to be able to interrupt on this episode if you have something to say. I obviously am doing it, so feel free. But all I was going to say is like you could look at that. I could look at a computer and be like, look at how complicated this is. This is obviously a really insane soul being. And it's like, well, no, it's actually just a bunch of circuits and electricity and gates that do things when things are reacted to and things do that. Like you get into the brain and the chemistry of the brain, and that's what it is.
I think you're making a good point, but I don't think reactions like disprove free will, or like I think you can react to things and have free will, because there's tons of times like in your day where something will happen and you'll have a natural reaction to that, but then I'm sure you choose to either not act that way or to act that way, or you choose to do something else.
But that's
what about the unnatural reactions? Like if we're really hungry and
give me an example. Like when would you choose to do something that wasn't a reaction?
Okay, like if someone, okay, for instance, for me.
I read an article today about dieting and why people like can't get they can't like change their weight. So basically, if it was along the lines of if you're dieting and your weight goes down so much, your brain sends chemicals to your body to make you hungry enough to bring you back to the weight that you were at. So people who are successful at dieting are fighting that natural reaction to listen to their brain to eat more. Does that make sense?
Right. But who are you refuting, me or Michael?
You, because you were talking about how everything's a reaction of a reaction of a reaction. And I think the free will is evident in the fact that we can fight against those otherwise natural reactions.
But that decision is a reaction to, like, you realize you saw yourself in the mirror and you didn't like what you saw, and that kicked off different chemicals that makes you anxious.
But your
and
reaction
it tapped into your history, and so then you're still reacting. It's just like an overreaction.
No.
But your reaction isn't determined.
No.
Your action is not determined.
Okay, so think about it,
but you do have a choice.
Well, I mean, at least we feel like we do. Well, you can't prove that we're not in a simulation. But what I was trying to say is
can't prove a lot of things.
Well, yeah, I know. But
if a rock was like flying through the air, the rock could be like, I have free will to fly and I'm flying this direction. It's like, well, you think you are, but I just threw you. That's the reason you're flying.
So we don't know if our free will
thinks,
is programmed in. No, you're saying it could, like if you were flying through the air, you could think that you're flying, but you're just going somewhere.
Like I could be like, I decided to not eating because I decided.
I got the analogy.
But anyway, what I'm trying to say is like there are times where like someone's being aggressive with you, and your natural reaction is to be aggressive back, but you can sit back and you can decide to be calm or to diffuse the situation another way.
You made a choice not to beat their ass.
We have natural
Why?
reactions.
I guess what Luke is saying is that could be.
Because you don't.
Well, that could still be a reaction.
I don't like that. No, wait. I don't like that. I feel like when you start doing what you're doing right now, Luke, and I feel like you're trying to dehumanize people. I feel like that's very dehumanizing by like you breaking down the fact that, well, this is just because of this, and this. So that's very sociopathic behavior.
I didn't say I liked it.
No. I'm just saying, like, you can't that concept, like that. Just I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah, I don't
That's
like
a valid
it.
point, though. It's like simulation
our
theory.
universe
Like,
is built up of tiny little reactions from micro scale all the way up to where we're at, and then way beyond forces we can't control or understand. So I mean, it's just fact. It's not dehumanizing. It's just fact.
And that's
I mean,
where
well,
and
no.
and that's where
I'm saying. Well, go ahead.
Well, no. What I'm saying is what I'm saying. Give me 2 seconds. It's I agree with Luke and I agree with you, Shayne, at the same time. So I'm going to put my 2 cents in. What the difficulty we have is whether we can say, you know what, the choices I made are because I'm reacting to something that is already happening, and then that started a new reaction. You know, it's just like the butterfly effect, right? I killed a butterfly. Well, guess what? Dinosaurs weren't born when you went back in time. Somebody wasn't okay. Let me rephrase. You went back in time, you killed a butterfly. That changed the entire evolution.
Okay, yeah, the butterfly
animals,
effect. Yeah.
Yeah, the butterfly effect, right? But at the same time, you can pick and choose what you do. You know, you can just choose what you want for lunch. You can go, you know what, I want this cake. I really want that cake. Everything in my body's telling me I want that cake, but I go get a salad instead. I mean, that's something we can all do.
yeah.
I'm just saying
Your
that,
body's
like,
telling you this is the more rewarding thing. But
yeah,
no,
and
no.
so like, Michael, let's go back to.
But then just like, but is that really a choice, or is it just something else in your brain kicked off that, you know, this is not good for my body? Your body's like, no, don't do that. Eat the salad. That's what Luke was doing.
Yeah.
Right,
So
That can
no, but
happen
it's
too.
it's more complicated than that. So like, Michael, I want to go back to what you said. You said if someone is reacting to you aggressively, and then you choose to not give in to that aggression, like,
Right.
I think the biological reaction would be to be aggressive back, and you're saying you make a free will decision to not do that. But here's the thing: like, if I was getting aggressive with you and you chose to not get aggressive with me, why would you do that?
Just because it's a logical choice doesn't mean it's not free will. Like, cause like I wouldn't do it because I would think that whatever I was gonna do instead would be more effective. But that
Your
doesn't mean
brain's
that it's
been
not
programmed
free will.
to
For you as a
do
whole, right?
But my brain's
What?
also been
What'd you say,
programmed
Tom?
to be aggressive back, though.
Right,
think
but it's
like
also been
there's
programmed
two-
to make better choices.
Well, even
Thinking
though
that
even,
going more in the direction of what like Luke is saying, where every decision is kind of like can be calculated in hindsight.
just because they're calculated and influenced by other things doesn't mean it's not free will, though. Like what you're saying is true, but it's not like it does. I don't think it. To me, it doesn't change the conversation.
Just because
Yeah,
just
the
just
fact
because
that
you
you
can just because you can do something or something is a possibility doesn't mean that it's determined that you're going to
Okay,
do
but I
that.
have a question.
Yeah.
Because I believe Michael just said this, because you're talking about it like in hindsight. Can you do the same thing to something currently happening in the moment, or can you do it before it happens? Can you be like, oh, this person's getting angry. Oh, okay, but they're probably going to make the best decision because this is going to happen in their brain, and then their body is going to shift, and then this
You
is
just
going to
don't-
happen. Or
you don't have
you're
enough
saying all of
data.
that after the fact. But I think that's what I'm saying. I don't
I
understand.
think if we had all of the data of the entire universe, then you could make an
you would know.
accurate prediction of what will happen.
Right. So
that's
like,
what I
there's
think God
too
has.
many factors to have to, like, basically, if I could measure every single thing in the world and put it into a formula, then I would know how you would react.
Or at least
That's the
have
theory.
99% certainty.
No, I
of-
would
No.
100% no.
You can't account
Because-
for human factors, dude.
And
But well, no. Okay, here, pull back.
I'm getting to determinism support.
So, so like, if I knew every single factor of every single thing since the beginning of time, I would know everything that was going to happen. The problem is you can't know all the
you
different
would be like that. What's the name
factors.
from The Flash? There was a character like that on The Flash. That's why he died.
But do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, the problem is
Yeah.
there's too many factors. There's the wind, there's the molecules, there's the physics of every little thing, the different planets, like the gravity of all the planets put together in every single direction, every little reaction of every little thing. You can't measure it because
see-
it's too much.
I think,
But this-
But if
I
you
think we're
could-
thinking of. I think we're thinking about it, at least in this context, very like small. Like, we're just thinking about ourselves. I think, I was been thinking about this recently since I saw that, I guess, NASA discovered like two black holes like colliding together, and it just made me really think about how small of a thing we are in existence. And I think in context of everything, because does a cow have free will, or is a cow's life, predetermined. You know, we react to the cow. If this cow didn't exist, if this cow didn't eat this much grass today, or I don't know how cows produce milk, but if this cow didn't do this thing today, would I have not gotten my milk today for my cereal that gave me the energy to whatever. So I think that, you know, there's so much that goes like into it, but I think that you have to think about it in the grand scheme.
So here's the question then.
And not just so small about like ourselves, because we're just such a small factor of like what makes things work.
I have a question going off of that. So do you guys, when you're thinking about free will and predestination, are you thinking of it like day to day, every decision you make, or like your goal or your destination? Because I kind of have a maybe it's really romantic belief, but I have a belief that like there's like a set, like there's like a perfect destiny for each person. And you either get it or you don't, but there's something that you're meant to do, or somewhere you're meant to be, or someone you're meant to be with. That's the perfect thing you can do. But you can mess it up, or you can find something else that's also good.
Let's do
Are
we
talking about that?
I want to come back to that one.
To get there.
I want to write that down, Michael.
So
you said everyone has a path basically, and they can either follow that path or not.
Like
right?
a destiny, like in the
that's what I said last week.
Okay, so before we get into that, I want to pull in.
I'm definitely on the fence now.
Yeah, we'll get to that one in 1 second. I just wrote it down so I won't forget.
Cool.
Andrew, you listened to the last episode and you had a lot of opinions, and you haven't had a chance to really talk too much. And so I want to know what you're thinking about all the stuff we're talking about so far.
Yeah, you had mentioned last week about you had this similar conversation about the mathematics of everything and how it's predetermined, and how you can know everything if you know everything. If that makes sense.
Right.
And the question is, how does free will fit in that? If everything can be predetermined, how does free will fit in that? And I think in that the way of viewing it that way, free will would be just a human concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a like a facade in a way. It's just like I feel like I have free will.
It's a way to explain the choices that you make.
Yeah. And like if you get rid of free will, the concept, then it's like, well, then how do we hold people responsible for the things that they do wrong?
You can't.
If it's predestined, they had so I get the concept of, as a society, we have to live as if free will exists.
Yeah.
But in terms of, does it actually in scientific rules exist? That gets harder to prove, especially if there's no God. And I think it's kind of more fun to think about it this way, because then it's like, I don't know, it's like, well, what could it possibly be scientifically? It's more complicated.
It's a lot more fun to talk about it.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we're kind of going down this road a little, because I think it's interesting. I think all this stuff is fun to talk about. So.
To quote the late great Stephen Hawking, he gave a talk in 1990 at Cambridge, and he came to that conclusion. He said, the tragedy of scientific materialism is that if we take all of its assumptions to heart, we are not free but are totally determined. So that was his exact conclusion, although he did follow that up by essentially saying, since I don't know what is being determined, I may as well not be.
Right.
Which is like a massive, like, here's the trap door that I made for myself, I'm hopping through it, see you guys.
It's ignorance is bliss almost.
Right. And which I think to your point, Luke, about if God doesn't exist, how can I have free will? Prager University makes that same point. They're like, because they kind of bounce off of the Jordan Peterson conscious self idea, where if everybody has a conscious self, something created the conscious self. Well, what did create the conscious self? Intelligence that's greater than we are. Okay, then how do we deal with that? Which is why someone like Sam Harris, who is very much scientific, materialist, all that, atheist, doesn't want to deal with that, because he thinks that this conscious self doesn't exist, that free will and consciousness is an illusion. So that's a part of this.
And you don't like Sam Harris's points very much. I actually feel like he makes good points on a lot of things.
He makes interesting points, and they're good to listen to. The thing that I have with Sam Harris is that when he talks about these things, he gives off this, if you agree with me, you're enlightened. If you disagree with me, you're an idiot. And I'm, you know what I mean?
He's very smug.
Yeah.
He's very calmly smug. He's like, I was just thinking if I would, you're like,
and it's the same.
Harris.
And it's the same thing. like Richard Dawkins has the same thing to him, where it's like, okay, if you agree with me, congratulations, welcome to the club of enlightened, smart people. If you don't disagree with me, oh well, you're just a silly person,
Right.
You should just probably go away. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
But
Nick, what are you thinking?
Man, I'm definitely on the fence now. Like, I'm further towards determinism after your talk about the mathematics behind it. Even with a god, I'm kind of like leaning towards the determinism side of things.
Yeah, like
Because I believe that, like, I believe all the science behind, the Big Bang and everything and how the universe was created, but I believe also, God set that in motion. So it's like, man, if I can see it being, there is a God and determinism is.
Yeah, because that's kind of the other cop out. I think that Josh mentioned earlier, like people saying, "Oh, you don't know God's ways," but it's also like, "Oh yeah, God could have just made it that way."
Yeah.
Like, so like to me, like everything that we've been saying doesn't necessarily disprove or prove like predestination. It's just something else that could also be happening with it.
I don't think it proves it, but my I don't know. My thoughts on this are more determinism now than free will.
Here's honestly the problem that I had with all of that whole debate that you guys had, which was great, is that Luke, you danced around Jordan Peterson's conscious self point and basically said, I don't like that explanation, or I just don't really want to deal with it. Because all of the talk about reaction, you guys talked about the reactions to things as if we don't have the right to choose within those reactions. Like the reactions are automatically must be determined.
Well, so there's a difference between do I have the right or do I feel like I have the right to choose? So I could, like I said, the rock flying through the air. Let's say a rock had a brain, and I kick the rock, and the rock flies through the air, and as the rock is flying through the air, the rock is going, oh, I decided I was going to do this. I decided I'm flying through the air. And it's like, well, you didn't technically. Technically, it just happened, and you feel like you thought you did it.
I don't think that's
So
a very
I don't think
that's a very good example.
I don't think that I jumped around Jordan Peterson's question. I think that what he said didn't really have a lot of weight. He basically said, look at how complicated the mind is, so we can't say it's predetermined. And I was like,
but
well,
I don't think that's a very good example.
Anything.
I don't think that's a very good example, though.
What do you mean? Of the rock?
Yeah, I don't think that's a very good example. I think a better example would be Luke's hungry at 12:30 p.m. Okay, hungry reaction is I need to feed myself. But then there's so many. But then the choice between I'm going to get a burger, I'm going to get a piece of pizza, I'm going to make some chicken, I'm going to get a salad.
No, but those are all sparks. But those are all sparked from things that either happened to me, or I experienced, or I craved. They're brain reactions. So if I wrote a program that said that was programmed to say I am choosing to do these things, I still wrote the program to do it. So your body is designed to do certain things. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're doing them or making the choices.
But again, you're talking about an inanimate object of a computer, as opposed to a human being. And again, that makes sense.
What's the difference?
That's what I'm getting to. That would make sense if we just leave nature and culture, but leave off the conscious self. If you include the conscious self into the equation, you can't compare a computer to a person.
You're talking about being like self-aware.
To a person.
You mean you're talking about being self-aware? Like we realize it's not like a wolf would.
Conscious self is something that no one has ever been able to truly define in terms of what it is or how it works. We just know that.
Yeah.
It exists.
So I know this goes into like cognitive behavioral theory, where it's like,
right.
Not only do I feel scared, I am aware that I feel scared, and I understand why I feel scared, and I'm choosing how I think about being scared. So it's like another dimension.
I have a question, Luke.
Conscious. All right. Yeah. Go ahead, Shayne. Go ahead.
Cause you keep saying this thing about like, reaction and stuff. And I mean nothing by this question. It's just a question. Is it like if your brain is telling you, like if you're hungry, your brain is telling you to eat, our brain sends many different communications to various parts of our body, correct? Isn't your brain choosing, like, I think subconsciously, aren't you choosing to eat the food because you are hungry? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think
But that choice is a reaction to maybe
it's still a choice.
Yeah, it's not like
It
you're
could be a
like.
stimulated choice.
It's not like you get hungry and then immediately you just without realizing you have to stand up and go like cook for like an hour.
Yeah, you don't just
and then-
like
So,
you don't
okay,
just
so
like I'm hungry.
your heart,
stand up,
right? Your
go,
heart
cook.
beats.
And you're
you
not a
don't
sim.
force. You don't make a choice. You don't make a choice to have your heart beat.
right.
Okay, so we all agree that like your heart beating is kind of more of an involuntary action. You can't make it stop yourself unless you kill
We
yourself.
don't-
But I mean, like it just keeps
Not
beating, right? So
consciously.
hold on.
You're using you're creating a
Don't
false
pick
dichotomy.
apart. Don't pick apart my example. You guys know
No,
what I mean.
because
I'm
you're
saying,
creating
like,
a false dichotomy.
I don't know.
No,
the
you're
Creating a
example.
false dichotomy.
How?
Because you're
Wait, can we
taking
get the
something
full
that we
context
cannot
first?
control.
Yeah, let's let him finish it and then we'll argue with it.
I was
I don't
saying
know
that
the
like it's
context.
different. It's different for me to say I'm going to choose between the burger and pizza, and my heart's going to beat, and I can't really control it. I'm technically doing it, but it's not something I'm controlling. Now, the only reason I bring that up is because you guys keep bringing up like thoughts and being like, "Well, I made the decision to choose the burger," and it's like ultimately it does feel like you made the decision.
Right.
But you could have been making that decision because, no, I remember the taste of the burger, and I remember it tasting better than the pizza, and I remember what it's like to refrigerate a burger versus a pizza, and I kind of have more of a craving for the burger, which trails back into like different things I tasted as a kid or different things my parents tasted as
Yeah.
kids. So it's like my genes and like that. It
But
all
aren't you still?
branches
How
off
does
from
that
all
make
these
that
other
any
things.
less
Wait,
free?
I have a question.
I think
But
It
aren't
depends on
you
how
still-
we define
wait,
free will.
wait, I have
I
a
think he's
question.
saying that like our choices are perceived as choices, or our actions are perceived as choices. In a sense.
What does it matter
And-
what they're perceived as and what they just are?
But if they're
That's what I'm
only
trying to figure out.
perceived as a choice, then, and it's like a, it's a. I think Luke's getting at. We make passive actions that are sometimes perceived as choices. Like all of our actions are, at some level, passive, and then some
Yeah,
of
they're
them are
passive because
perceived
we've
as choices.
done them. We've gotten conditioned. We've conditioned ourselves to do certain things, but I don't think that doesn't mean it's still not
Yeah.
a choice.
Like
Let's
a
say
reflex. Like a reflex.
Like, I mean,
doesn't
I can
mean
I
that
can
you
clean
can't
my
choose
room
something
every
else.
single day, and I just do it naturally. That's just what I do, and I can choose one day. You know, I'm just not going to clean my room today.
Yeah, I don't
but
think habits
if,
are.
if we make new choices, though, that could be a reaction to something that we're unhappy
Well, yeah.
with.
I mean, that's
You know,
like.
we
This,
find
I
somewhere
feel
happy
like,
with
I feel like we
it.
should move on
Choice.
because this is like. I feel like we should move on because this is like simulation theory. We can't prove
I just-
whether or not we're making these decisions or
I mean,
not.
I'm having,
I think it's
I'm
kind
having
of like
fun,
besides the point.
But I just
I
think
just
that
don't
like you
understand.
could
We're in a
define.
circle.
We're still making the choice. No matter how you get to making the choice, you're still making the choice.
You could define free will, like you could say that if I cognitively, well, actually that's even hard to say. If I cognitively make a decision in my brain, like calculations go through my mind and I decide something, we could all agree like, okay, let's pretend like that's free will. I'm just talking, but the problem is I keep focused on like a base level analysis of it. Is it free will or
I
is it
think you're
determinism?
looking. I think you're looking at it as the person.
It's the
behind the
non-fun way of
computer.
looking at it.
And
Yeah.
like you're looking at it. You're looking at it from I'm playing Sims 3 right now, and we're looking at it as, hey, we're the Sims. And no, just
That's what we're
kidding.
trying to figure out.
Very,
But like I said,
very,
why do you-
very
why do you-
complicated
but-
Sims.
But I mean, we kind of are like in a simulation if you like think about it that way. I mean, if like if I mean, like I believe like if God created us to be here for this thing, like that is kind of a simulation. Like, in
Yeah,
a
we're like
sense.
in a little
If-
habitat that he made.
We are kind of in a simulation technically. I think. But
Yeah.
that's a good,
I see that.
whatever.
But let's. Okay, do you want to go
But
into
if you
theology
make
of it
if you
all?
make any decision, if you make any choice, then can't you explain why you made that choice? So in hindsight, there was some sort of calculation that led up to that. Like why did I choose to
yes,
eat the pizza?
yeah. Everything leads into each other. We're constantly making choices that make us make other choices, and everything. We have a timeline, so everything kind of flows. But I don't think that means it's I don't think it means it's necessarily predetermined that we're going to make all of these choices.
So
Because I just don't think that, because like there's a lot of things that like there's a lot of things that that I personally have gone through in life that I just don't really see how that could have been predetermined, when I've had the choice many times to like not have something happen, but like I'll do it anyways. So it's hard, and I don't know, it's hard for me to think that like it's like everything's how it happens.
I think
I don't
But
know.
if you make any choice, it seems to me that it's a result of chemical
Yeah, it's a
reactions in your mind that are happening sort of passively, and you perceive that action as a choice.
Yeah, what if I put once again, Hot Wheel, I know these are simple examples, but this is a complicated topic, and so it's hard to explain some of these things. And so I'm trying to break it down. If I had a Hot Wheel car on a track, it's always going to go down that track, okay? But imagine if I put something in that Hot Wheel car that had a brain that made the car think it was deciding which direction it was going when it really wasn't. Now, this is getting into, like I said, it's complicated. And here's the thing. If you guys disagree with me, obviously some people are making their voice known. I don't want like the podcast to end and then you guys talk about how much you disagreed with me and you didn't tell me on the air.
That example kind of threw me off, because you just said, I have a Hot Wheel car and I put something in the Hot Wheel car that has a brain, but then you just said that the car thought something.
I don't like these examples because I don't feel like they're comparable.
Well,
It's not exactly easy to come up with an example for this. Because the example I gave you...
I think it's just like exactly like human consciousness.
The problem is, the only difference between... The reason you guys don't like this is because you don't like the idea of not having that control over your brain. And I'm just saying, like, it's not a fun thing to think.
No, I'm just
saying
I don't like the example.
Like we've been talking about on other things for the last week or two, we can rewire and reprogram our brain by different choices and habits. But I know what you're going to say is that, well, that chemical reaction led to a certain point where you no longer feel that those choices you were making were good, so you shift gears and go down a different path.
Right.
But people do that without reacting to bad circumstances. A lot of people will go, oh, I don't want to do this anymore because it's bad. And then other people go, I could take it or leave it. Like I love cigars, but
that's like overly simple, like that's simplifying it too much, because even though it's like, oh, I didn't get into a car wreck, but I'm still going to fix my driving. I could see someone else get into a car wreck, or I could see other things in the world that scare me, so I'm careful in general. So that's a chemical reaction in the brain.
I think that's what we're going to keep running into, is whether or not the conscious influences that decision or is influenced by other things, right? Because
yes.
I mean, I had a Mustang. I was a reckless driver at times, and other times I wasn't. I mean, there's times I'm driving like a 70-year-old, and then other times I'm driving like a 22-year-old who's just got out of the Marine Corps and is bored out of his mind.
Yeah, and sometimes you can react differently in the same context more than once.
But people aren't the same, though. They all have different experiences and different genes and different histories and different.
But they still have. All right, so let's say we all work for a living. I'm assuming some of you may be able to sit down and make videos and make money off of that.
I got a sugar mama.
Who does that?
Yeah. Whoa,
I want that life.
Nah.
I make videos and get paid.
Luke. But I mean, I can make the choice
Luke's
to
a hardworking man.
Oh, I know he is.
Thank you, Shayne.
But I can make that choice to go to work every day because I know I won't be able to pay my bills, or I can make that choice to live off somebody else's government, right? I can make the choice to ignore my anxieties when I walk into a stop. I sell things, into a location and be like, oh my God, I don't want to talk to these people. Or I can go in there and go, all right, I don't like this. Everything in my body is telling me to run, and my mind's telling me to run. I'm racing, I'm out of control. Or I can really focus and get myself to stop, get into a different place, and then let that take its course. I mean, there is some automatic responses, right? I think everybody knows that. At some point, you can turn something off, and then you just coast. Other times, you have to make a conscious effort to switch something or change something, regardless if you like it or not. I mean, heroin addicts or morphine addicts have to change.
Those
even
automatic...
though they're completely controlled.
When you shut your brain off and go into automatic mode, you're still going off of a programming in your brain. You're just doing it subconsciously. It's a habit. When you formulate a habit, your brain activity goes down. And so when you turn into automatic mode, you're like, well, I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing. It's like, well, you're not consciously
you
thinking about,
program
but your
your
whole
computer to do
brain,
that.
right, over time. And
no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm
yeah,
saying,
like I know my examples aren't perfect because I didn't really think before this podcast what examples I was going to give. But I'm
Neither
just
did I.
trying, the complexity of this makes it hard for me to explain clearly where I'm coming from, because it's like you said, well, one person could do one thing and then another person could be in the same situation and then they might do different things. What's up with that? And it's like, well, yeah, because they have completely different histories,
I don't think that's
completely different genes, completely different
right.
brains and upbringings and
This is a
nurturing.
case by
and-
case.
Different memories.
yeah, so it's like you can't compare the two because
Yeah.
why would they ever do the same thing? It's so complicated.
I think
Right.
I think one of the biggest issues we're having is
Not robots.
we do make choices. We make choices every day, and in our experiences throughout our days, we have that choice. So it's hard to think about not having that choice. It's hard to think about not having that consciousness.
And I think,
or it not being a choice after all. Like
Yeah,
your
it's hard
perception
to,
of
it's
that
hard to
event was a
say
choice.
that because you live that way, but it could possibly be that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It goes in. Well, it goes into the ignorance is bliss, because I could believe, and it'd be much more fun to believe that life is not painful, and it'd be nice if that's the way things were. But what's the reality? That life is painful, and so what we're trying to kind of formulate is not what feels better or what we wish was the case. It's like, well, what is the case really? And that's why I'm not saying anything that I really like. I'm just saying that in concept, we kind of are like machines and robots. Now, if we have a soul,
kind of-
that's a different question, or that's a different thing. But it's hard to argue against the case.
Oh yeah, totally. And I
This
think like it's kind of like
explains
a,
how. Oh, sorry.
it's kind of like a someone like conducting a train. Like a train's on a track, and it's gonna do what it's gonna do on its own. But like the conductor can take over and stop the train. They can switch the tracks to another track. They could even literally take the train off of the tracks and do something else with it. Like even though the machine has a set path, I think obviously it's hard to know. But even if there's a set path and you have things that you react to
But
naturally, there's still the conductor, or
there's-
like your soul or whatever.
Yes, you're still in charge of.
Maybe.
Well, not in charge, but you still make choices.
If we do make choices, then yeah. I mean, it's
If
still
you're on the
unknown.
path.
But what do you think about
That's just me.
like kind of going back to the beginning with like the God being loving thing? Because I remember one thing I wanted to talk about was last week. You guys mentioned a little bit about how if God put Adam and Eve in the garden and he put the tree of knowledge of good and evil there, which for context is like if they ate of that tree, the only rule was not to eat from that tree, and if they did,
Yeah.
then they would die, which means that they would be separated from God and live normal lives like we do now. And someone said like, oh, like is it kind of like God knew what they were going to do, so they didn't really have a choice, it seems. Like, what do you guys think about
Well, I
that?
think Luke's idea of everything being a chemical reaction kind of explains then, to me, like how God can know everything. Because if everything is a reaction to a reaction to a reaction, and God knows all the variables, then he does know then what choices we would make, because he can make that calculation.
Right.
Um,
So you're saying
Um,
we're like NPCs in a video game. We just have limited
Well-
limited choices for reactions.
We talked about these a lot on this podcast before.
I know. You gotta love them.
But one thing
I mean, like,
one
I
thing
mean,
I
I've
wanted
been
to talk
playing Red
about-
Dead, and a lot
Go
of the
ahead.
guys have a predetermined choice and path.
Right.
But depending on how you interact with them,
What
they
would
make a
happen
different-
if one of the NPCs in Red Dead was like, no, I have free will?
I would believe a programmer programmed him to say that, and then I'd take a rope and tie him up and take him on a horseback ride.
Wait, we're going back to the last topic again. I'm trying to move forward. What I'm trying to say is like, so someone said that like, how is that free will? Because like God's basically forcing them to choose this, because I mean they have one choice. They're obviously gonna mess up eventually. And this is something that, from a theological standpoint, really messed me up for a while, because when I was in Bible college, it's actually the closest I ever came to becoming an atheist than ever anything else. More of an anti-theist, because I grew up looking at God one way, and then I learned more about God, and I just didn't understand or agree with a lot of the things that were happening. And my friend and I
Yeah,
were
that's where
really
I'm at
struggling
now.
with this. Say what?
That's kind of where I'm at now, where it's
Yeah.
more like a distaste for God than like a disbelief.
Yeah, and one thing that really helped me was because I was talking about this with my friend. We were like, because we were talking about kind of just sins that we struggled with, and we were like, why is it that everything that we are not supposed to do, we want to do? Like, I naturally crave to like be lazy and just like live for myself. That's like the natural, like position humans have. But like, all the good things take work. Everything that's great takes lots of time, energy, and sacrifice. And I was like, why would God like put them in the garden and give them this choice when he knew they were gonna mess up? But the thing is, if he didn't give them a choice, and this is kind of more Christian-y, whatever, but if he didn't give them a choice, then his love wouldn't be the same. Like if the only choice they had was to love him, and there was nothing else, it wouldn't mean as much, right? But like to make someone hate you and still show them love is more like it's easy for me to be nice to my friends because I care about them. They're nice to me. I'm nice to them. Like it's not a big deal. But if I'm nice to somebody who hates me or like someone who just hurt me, like that's a bigger deal. Like the action of my love towards them means a lot more in that case, right?
Yeah.
And this also raises lots of other questions, but I think in that sense, I was thinking about that when I heard the podcast. Theologically, like God giving them a choice, even though He knew they were going to fail, is giving them an opportunity to love Him. One, because they want to, but two, lets Him show them even more love than if they just had no other choice but to love Him and be happy.
Oh, that's a really good point. I think my heart resonates with the anti-God notion because that's something that I had too. Way that it was explained to me through, again, my own kind of Calvinistic theology thing, because Calvinistic theology, they say sovereign of God, but what they mean by that is complete or total sovereignty of God, in which God is responsible for everything that we do, good, bad, sin, righteous, or otherwise, right? Which I don't agree with. Whereas you can believe that God is, and this kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning, where God is sovereign, but He sovereignly created us to have free will, and I think that that's evidenced in the Garden of Eden with the tree, that He gave them the choice to choose Him or to choose the tree.
I still struggle with the why did He put the tree there if it was going to lead to our downfall.
I
But I
feel
guess
like
I
if
don't know the
he didn't,
alternative.
it'd be weirder. Because
I
like,
think-
I mean, it would suck.
I think
It sucks now, but
Sorry,
like
go ahead.
we'd be forced to love, and we'd have no other choice, and it wouldn't be real, you know.
I guess the bigger picture answer to that is that God saw that it would be better to have a world with choice, as opposed where it could be where sin was a reality, as opposed to there was no choice and sin wasn't an option.
I mean,
That
you
for
can
whatever
defend
reason-
it. You can defend it by saying like, well, it's God, so we'll never understand it because it's stupid for us to believe with our tiny human brains that we can understand God, which I do take that into account. I just try not to make that my answer if I can help it.
And that's kind of embedded in what I said there, but it's, I don't know, I think that's kind of a nicer way to sound like, well, don't question God because He knew what He was doing. I think one of the ways that I had it described to me was that God, and this will reveal my theology a little bit on this, but true love doesn't force people to love that person back. Because if you try to force it, it's more of a control factor. Like, I want to control who you are. You will love me, or you will not
If you
love
force
me.
it,
It's more of a control.
It's not love anymore.
It's not love. But if there's a willing choice involved to say, I've put you in, so to use the Garden of Eden, I've put you in this garden, you're in full, complete union with me, you're together with me, you walk with me, the whole 9 yards, just don't eat of this tree. You're basically saying, do all of these things as you walk with me because this is the gift of my love, but I'm asking you, don't do this. It's kind of, so I got married back in August, as Luke said, and
Woo!
and a big part of marriage is saying, I'm committing to you and you alone because I love you, I still have the choice, if I wanted to go and sleep with other people. But what does that say about my love toward the other person?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that kind of falls into that, I think, in a cosmic way. And I think and then another great biblical image of this is the prophet Hosea with his wife. Marries somebody who then turns out to be an adulterer, who turns out to, becoming a prostitute and the whole 9 yards, and he still takes her back. And it's the image of, I have my bride, which is Israel, or now I have the bride, which is the church, and my bride is sleeping with other people. Like, my bride is cheating on me with other people, and yet I am still taking them back and loving them. And so then that's kind of there again.
Mm-hmm. But then the awkwardness is,
but we still have the
awkwardness is now he's like, yeah, you can choose to love me and it'd be awesome, or you can not, and then you just go and burn forever. Like, that's cool.
Well, right,
whatever you want to do. Like, it's your choice.
I mean, I can
right,
entertain
but
the idea that
suffer forever.
maybe we have Hollywoodized what we think hell actually is. I do think that there's a possibility that we are making it cartoon.
Well, yeah,
it's fire and burn and torture. It's like, how do we know that hell's not just the world?
Burning and gnashing of teeth.
And then we just, the Bible's very symbolic too.
Yeah.
So
and
hell might not be what we think it is.
Different options, kind of, not like that you can choose, but like some people believe in like conditionalism, where you go to hell just based on the crimes that you have committed, and then after that you're either destroyed or you get to go to heaven. It depends. Or like there's like what's it called, annihilationism, where like you really just like stop existing. Like you go get judged and God just like and there's like there's lots of possibilities within Christianity of like what hell could be. So yeah, you're right, it might not be the freaky thing that we see on TV and like think about when we hear of hell.
Except for the fact that Jesus says, I mean, I don't know, to me Jesus sounds pretty specific about what hell is.
Yeah,
he compares it to like Golgotha, which is like a trash.
I guess the clarification of what they were saying was like there's a lot of different interpretations of what Jesus said.
Right.
And then those interpretations are kind of like, well, what does he mean by this? Does he mean this literally? Does he mean it metaphorically? Yeah. So I know where all of you guys are coming from. That's just kind of the.
It's just like if I said, hell is a place where there's gnashing of teeth, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, what does that mean? Oh, it means people are literally going to take their teeth and just crunch them together. That's what Jesus said. That's exactly what he meant. That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, hold up. Now, what does that mean exactly? And so it's like, oh, it's a place of fire and death and pain. And it's like the world right now is a place of fire and death and pain.
We're already there.
So what if hell was like, you just stay here on earth?
I think an interesting one that I heard was that hell is complete and utter separation from God, which is painful and awful and horrible and the whole 9 yards, which could either be like a legitimate physical reality or could be annihilationism. I don't know, but that's kind of the.
Or it could be a weird like spiritual place where you're still on Earth and you just can't connect to Him.
Yeah,
I think to add on to what Josh said, it's not only separation from God, like according to the Bible, it's being revealed to God as a judge and knowing who God is and then being separated from him.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, 'cause it doesn't
Like
matter
actually
if you
rejecting
anyway.
it, you mean?
Yeah, because like you go to heaven, you're like, oh man, God is real, and He's like, yeah, but you can't come. Like, send you back. Or send you wherever. Yeah, it does suck, and that's why like predestination is such a scary thought, because like if God is choosing who does and who doesn't go, then it's kind of nefarious sounding from that perspective.
Yeah.
Now we're all
That's
sad.
that's one of my biggest problems with Calvinistic predestination is that it's like, oh,
yeah,
it's be very uncomfortable.
But the way I've heard it. Oh, go ahead, man.
I think
Andrew, go ahead.
I think that's a tough thing. Like going back to what you guys were saying about who are you, oh man, to question God. I think it's a very human way to view it. I mean, God created punishment. God created hell. There's a reason for that, and I don't think it's just to punish the bad people. I think there's a reason He created hell. I think it's to express His justice. So I don't think it's a complete these are bad people, so they need to go to hell. I think in some way he made it for a purpose. And that purpose was to express his justice, but also express his love by choosing some.
Because it's outside of predestination. Like, it's really easy. Like, he says, hey, just like tell me you don't want to go to hell, and you don't have to. Like, it's not that hard. But like, predestination definitely makes it a lot more confusing.
The problem is you would have to figure out that that's all you have to do. And I know it's like, well, the Bible just says it. I'm like, well, yeah, but the Quran says something else. And so how do I know which one of those is true? Well, we just know. And it's like, well, you just know what you grew up with.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with someone in one of my life group Bible studies one time, and I forgot exactly what we were talking about. We were kind of talking about something similar, and I had said, and I still believe this. I had said I just don't really see. I said God has to give us free will or have the ability to make choices, because if he didn't, then if predestination were a thing, then we're all a thing in its entirety, then we would just be basically like puppets. And I just, it's hard for me to find the reason why he would create us to just be puppets. Like, what's the point? Like, that would just be like a big game, and I don't really see how
You already have puppets. You don't need more.
Exactly, that
puppets.
just doesn't make any sense. Like, what's the point of even creating an entire existence for us just to go through a thing that he's already like completely decided for? It's hard. It's really hard for me to even believe that predetermination exists in its entirety. I feel like that's why I'm still stuck on this. There's a weird mix of we have the ability to make choices, but I think that there are whatever choices we make lead us down the path, and whatever the path is, like, ultimately we all die, right? Like, that's the end of our path that we're on, but I think we make choices to how we get there. I don't think it's I think we make choices to how we get there.
So we've come to predestination exists, but we haven't come to free will exists.
Well, I mean,
I didn't know if Luke was going to ever ask us, like, what's our final overall thoughts, because I was going to save it for that. But
I also think that, like,
I can speak my piece now.
I think though,
What about
like,
what about the fact that, like, I mean, I find comfort in the heaven hell thing where the Bible says it's God's will for all to be saved, and it's like, okay, well, he'll work it out.
Yeah,
kinda.
hopeful universalism. Like, God could still decide to let somebody who did not necessarily follow him on Earth, he can give them a chance. Kind of like in The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis. It's like the last Narnia book. They're watching Narnia like be destroyed, and there's like a bunch of Narnians around him, and around Aslan, who's like the Jesus figure. And there's this guy who's a Talmarine, who's basically was like the other religion of people like in the world that they lived in. And he was there, and he was like, oh man, like, how'd I get here? Like, I'm not supposed to be here. And Aslan's basically like, hey, every time that you served your family and loved your neighbor, and every time you did something good for your God, I just took it as if you did it for me.
Right.
So that's the
I mean,
thing.
C.S. Lewis was a confirmed universalist himself.
Yeah, and I do kind of lean that way a little bit, because I mean it makes sense to me. Where it's
I
like
hope for that to be true, but I don't.
well,
know
if it's
that.
like if someone was a
know if it is, but that'd be
Muslim
cool
and
if it was.
if someone was a Muslim and they did good things, they took care of people, and they kept the laws that God wanted them to, and they just didn't they didn't technically hear the word or technically ask for forgiveness or whatever it is that you're supposed to do. I'm just trying to imagine God being like, sorry man, you didn't read what was on the sheet of paper, man. It's like the DMV. It's like, well, you didn't get the blue form.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just don't know that I feel like God knows more than that.
I guess the biggest thing that crops into my mind when you say that is I would be more on board with that if every world religion were essentially the same and superficially different, except the reality is that every world religion is essentially different and superficially the same. And that's kind of where I fall on that, is just kind of like, I don't know. like I remember years ago I got into a conversation with somebody who was Wiccan, and like he believed like in every single god you could ever name or exist, and I flat out asked him the question. I was like, how do you work through different gods who say polarly opposite different things, or declare like one truth over here and then this other god declares a truth that's polar opposite across the board?
It's
like
still
how do you reconcile that? And he was just like, I don't. And I'm just like, well, all right.
Yeah, I think it's still possible to like to be wrong. It's still possible to like not live a good life. It's the same way as if somebody lived their life just like being a dick and like, or murdering people or stealing or whatever. Like just because they maybe were good in some areas or had some religion doesn't mean that they would be saved in that.
Well,
thing that I was talking
we
about.
got into this debate, Josh and Jordan, when I was there in Chicago, where I just said the Bible says.
Oh, whoa. Hang on. Time out. You were not in Chicago. You were in Bloomington, Illinois. Illinois is bigger than Chicago. Let's just get this out of the way.
Someone's a little sensitive about this.
Okay, seriously?
Fine.
You go
Bloomington
anywhere-
with all your food, fine.
Okay, seriously, like you go anywhere in the country and you say, "Oh, I'm from Illinois," the immediate response is, "Oh, where in Chicago do you live?" Or "How's Chicago?" And you're just like, Illinois is 99% cornfields.
It's
that
like when
1% that is Chicago does not count.
Yeah, that's what people from New York say to me. They're like, "Oh, I'm from New York," and I'm like, "Safe bet. Is it New York City?" And they're like, "No, there's other places." It's like, all right, calm down, okay? New York is a big city, so I just assumed it might be there. All right, so when we were in Bloomington. When we were in Bloomington,
I had to give you crap for that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. When we were in Bloomington, we discussed this a little bit, where I said the Bible says that Jesus said, "Nobody gets to the Father except through me."
Right.
But that's a very open sentence. It's like, what does that mean exactly? And then a lot of people would say, well, that means you have to pray a very specific prayer, very specifically asking the right thing, and then that's it. And it's like that. It doesn't say that in that verse. Does it say it somewhere else? Like what?
I'm totally with you. I don't believe it's a raise your right hand kind of prayer at all.
Right. So it's like, what does it mean through me? That can mean a lot of different things. That's kind of open ended.
Yeah.
So like the Orthodox Church tradition is, and I say Orthodox like the general rule for the church throughout history has been that when Jesus says no one comes to the Father except through me is what is, if the general rule of thumb for this has been putting your belief and faith in Jesus Christ and then obeying him and following him. But like the faith is what saves you. The obedience is the evidence of that faith. And so that's kind of the starting point of, okay, what's the Orthodox teaching of this text? And that's what that is. Which, and you brought up, and this could be a whole other podcast for another day, Luke, we spend a lot of time working through this idea because Luke's been wrestling with, well, that's your interpretation. How do we deal with different interpretations of Scripture, stuff like that, which is a great conversation to have. And I think it's a very important conversation to have. But that's where you start from, is how has the church taught this in the past, and that's the way the church has taught it in the past.
I mean, I do the same thing with my own brain, right, where I believe a certain thing, and then when I really dissect it, I go, wait a second, okay, this is a little bit of a cognitive distortion. That's not quite right. Like if I say I have to pass this test because I have to get this job because I have to do this, and if I don't do that, then I'm not perfect and I made a mistake and I'm a failure and it's all ruined. And it's like, wait a second, okay, hold up. That's not quite right. If I don't pass this test, then I don't pass this test. Doesn't mean I'm a failure. I can like fail a test and not be a failure. I don't have to be perfect. Like it's all rooted in a little bit of a twisted viewpoint that I have to be perfect. And that's not right. And so what I try to do with the Bible is say, what are the cognitive distortions that we're formulating based on the Bible?
Do you think that that's an accurate way to do everything, though? Like, so what you just described about passing the test, do you think that that's an appropriate way to work your way through every problem or every situation?
Well, I think it's about what's true. What am I believing that's true?
I think it's wise to assess what you think and try to make sure it's not just an emotional response or just like an automatic response to something.
No, I agree with that.
We're not talking about that, though. He doesn't do that. He goes overcritical to the point where you want to. It's like, dude, you can breathe. It's okay. You're allowed to breathe.
Well, yeah, you have to be balanced about it.
No, I agree with Luke when it comes to that. Like, you have to take some time to look at what you're doing and what you're thinking and critically assess it and make the decision. It's just at what point do you go, all right, I've gone so far down the rabbit hole that I'm literally driving myself crazy and I can't function as a human being.
Well, that's subjective, I guess, to the person. You got to figure it out. But I think
I agree.
I think the best way is to is not to you can't. There's some things you're just never gonna figure out. Like for me, I've been talking about this stuff for the past couple of weeks actually, because I'm always worried that I'm on the right path that God wants me to be on. Like I'm always trying to make sure that I'm making the right choices or whatever, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But I also understand that a lot of these things that I wrestle with and that I don't know, I'm never gonna fully figure out. But there's steps to it. Like I've learned more and more, and every time I learn more, I add that to what I know. And
well,
for
that's
instance,
the frustrating part about it, right?
Yeah, well, the frustrating part is I keep finding new things that I know, and then I keep finding new things that I was wrong about. But I also I was talking about Destiny the other day, and the person I was talking to was like, "Oh, you keep contradicting yourself." I'm like, "I know, because there's not one answer, and I know this." So for me, having that mindset going into it helps me not be stressed about it, because yeah, there's lots of different possibilities, and yeah, there's lots of different answers, and I don't know which one's right, but that's okay, because it's a big problem, you know? Mm-hmm. So you gotta look at it as what it is, which is a big problem you gotta figure out.
And I'm just saying that with psychology, we have core beliefs that sort of warp our thinking. Mm-hmm. So if I have a core belief that I have to be perfect, that's not quite right. You don't have to be perfect, or you're never gonna be perfect. So if you let yourself be miserable anytime you're not exactly perfect, you're going to be miserable all the time. Mm-hmm. And so,
agreed.
And so what the cognitive or the distortions of the scriptures are what the Pharisees always did. And the thing about the Pharisees, just for anyone who's not a Christian, the Pharisees were the ones that kind of took a very literal translation and very much followed the rules, and just weren't very loving people in a lot of ways. So the distortions that they had, they didn't realize that they were Pharisees. So for us, we're not going to know that we have a distorted view of the Bible.
Yeah.
Or a distorted view of anything. That's the whole thing, is nobody's going to know that you're confused. So what I just try and say is how am I confused? How are other people confused?
I guess.
No, I know.
I guess he's saying he's trying to ask how do you know when you're doing it in a healthy way? And I think if you feel really stressed out all the time, you're probably not doing it in a healthy way. But I guess I'm saying
exactly.
Look at it as steps and progress. If you're building something, you're not going to finish the whole house in one day. All right, today I'm going to figure this out, and then I'll add to it, and then I'll add to it. Or if you're trying to find something, you're I got some clues. This is the clues that I have, and I'll find it.
Okay, let's do final words. This is not a Joe Rogan podcast. We're gonna wrap it up. Who has something more that they would like to say?
I mean, I'll say
I'm
something.
still not convinced one way or another.
But who's talking?
Yeah, how about I have Andrew go first, since he was the guest and he wanted to join?
Sure.
Yeah, Andrew. I know we had a lot of conversation. look what happened. You know?
Yeah, a lot of conversation.
So what are your final words? It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in. I just my personal beliefs about God kind of made it a little difficult to participate. Just because when we were first talking about a secular view on this kind of thinking, it was very easy to just say, agree with Luke about everything just being predetermined based on reactions and math. But because of my belief in God and how the Bible's pretty clear about God predetermining and God having a plan before the foundation of the earth, it's kind of hard to have this conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
because it's already
If you're rooted in a set of rules that we're not following.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my final thought would be like to go back to what I said before when we were more in the secular realm. It seems like free will because we make choices. I mean, I live my life like that every day. I live my life freely because I view it that way. But the Bible tells a different story. At least my belief is that it is a story pre-written, but I get to take part of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, you could have this whole debate, and just in a church, you know, like this whole debate is huge. Just in.
We don't need any more church splits.
No, but I mean, like this is like a philosophical. What's the word? This is a philosophical debate, and it's difficult, but it branches into just philosophy in general and in the church itself. Yeah. So it's a big topic. Totally. So, who else has something they'd like to say before we wrap up?
I'll go. I'm still stuck in the middle, but maybe a little more towards predetermination or whatever the other one we're using was, predestination versus free will. I'm definitely on the predestination side with plenty of free will. It's like I'd say a 60-40 split.
Okay.
That makes any sense. I moved a little more to the left with predetermination, but I still believe there's plenty of free will options and choices we make.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm ready.
Who else?
Michael, I guess this is Michael talking. I guess for me it's like I think they're both true a little bit, obviously, because like Andrew keeps saying, it is in the Bible where God talks about like preordaining and like counting our, like having our steps planned out. But I think it's more maybe like on a broad sense, like in the history of the world, God wants to accomplish these things. They're going to happen, and He can use you to do it, or if you don't do it, He'll use somebody else. But I think that if God is love, then I think that predestination, in the sense that He chooses who and who doesn't go to heaven, I think it's just incompatible. Those things don't make sense together. But it's obviously got to be a mix, because if God knows everything that's going to happen and He doesn't stop it, He's still kind of making it happen. Or, you know, there's just a lot of stuff. But basically, like, for me, that interpretation of predestination makes the most sense, where it's like the broad scheme of the world, God's in control and He has a plan, but He can use you or not use you. You can choose Him, you cannot choose Him, whatever. For me, like, I think that free will and God being love not free will, predestination and God being love can't coexist if God chooses who does and doesn't go to heaven. And I think for me, if that's true, that God does only elect certain people and does send certain people to hell, that wouldn't be a God I could serve, you know? And I'm not trying to like do like mental gymnastics to get there, but from what I'm looking at, what I'm learning, I feel like it still works. Like, God has a big plan for everybody, and either you can do it or you can't do it. But bottom line is, you still have the choice to do what He wants you to do, or choose Him or not choose Him.
Okay, fair enough. Who else? Anyone else want to close things?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with all the people that are saying God has. Michael, I guess, kind of said it in probably a more way that I agree with. I do think that God has a plan for everyone, but I think that's our choice if we we go with that plan, or we choose our own plan. And I think that's completely free will, because I think that we can't live in this existence the way that I feel like I feel like God created it to be without free will. Like Michael said, it just doesn't make any sense. But I also think that there are a lot of things in this existence that we're just not really supposed to know and supposed to figure out. And I personally think this is one of them, because I don't think having the answer makes any difference to our lives. I think we should spend more time being kinder to people and making the world a better place to exist in currently.
I think we can all agree with that one.
That was my social justice.
That's right.
speech.
Be nicer, everyone.
That should be
Nick,
our
do you have
focus.
anything you'd like to say?
I'm definitely leaning on the side of the what you were talking about, Luke, with the everything being like a chain reaction. But I think my belief in that would be conditional on the fact that God's will is everyone is saved. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions still that I have. I feel like this is a never-ending thought process for me.
Okay. Josh?
I'm where I was before.
I mean, like closing remarks, though, you know.
Oh yeah. I believe that God is sovereign. All that we know and all that we have. That He created us to be active participants in this world, and thus He created us with free will to choices, and ultimately the bottom line choice to love Him and obey Him or not. And consequences, whether positive or negative, that really shapes my own view on determinism, which I guess the better claim for me is theistic determinism.
Okay. Good stuff, guys. I had fun. I think this stuff is really fun to talk about. I don't think it's easy to... No, sorry, this is my...
I had fun.
This is my closing remarks. Respect me? No.
But
No,
seriously,
I
choose not to give into that.
Yeah. No, I don't think that there's an easy... I don't think there is a way to really come up with a final answer with this stuff, but I think it's fun to talk about just because it's complicated and it's thought-provoking and, yeah, I enjoyed it. So I don't really have anything other to say.
My determined reaction is to be indignant at those words.
All right, well, that's right. Well, if that's your deterministic viewpoint, there's no changing your mind, so might as well move on. Let's go. So, plugs, everybody. Let's start with Michael.
My name is Michael. Check me out on the Instagram. Michael Demas, MyKolDimas. All the stuff I do is up in there. So yeah,
Woo. Okay.
I'll be
Shayne.
posting answers to
Okay.
all of the theological questions in the world on there. in the next 5 days.
Okay. Oh, done? Okay. Shayne.
So yeah, check out the podcast that I host called the Pop Talk Podcast. The next episode, we're talking about the latest album from Imagine Dragons. So there's that. And yeah, and then yeah, we follow us on social media. Everything's just at Pop Talk. And then if you want to follow me, Twitter and Instagram is at Mr. McCatty, MrMccatty. And I actually should probably having another vlog coming soon because Michael and I are supposed to be going to see Venom. So yeah, vlog might be coming soon. But yeah, that's all I got.
We're finally
Cool.
gonna see it.
All right.
Potentially.
It's bad.
Nick.
Shut up.
I have no
Shut up.
expectations, So
You're off the podcast.
I'm just going for Amari and for my onesie.
All right, Nick, what plugs do you have?
I'm in a band called Days Gone By. We're about to put out our single, probably in like 2 months. I don't know if that's soon or whatever, but yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Where can we follow this band? How do we know about this band? Do you have like an Instagram?
We have nothing, no online presence. We're waiting on our
just
mixes.
kidding.
Oh, no.
You know.
Okay.
It's in the works.
Cool.
It's okay, guys.
Josh.
If anyone is ever curious, I'm the pastor of Wapella Christian Church. It's a small country church in the middle of cornfields and soybean fields in Illinois. But
Soy. Sorry.
you can visit us at wapellacc.org, and that's WAPELLACC.org. All the sermons that I preach are recorded audio recorded and put out on there. So if anyone's ever curious, Fruits of the Spirit series all the way through Christmas. So you can check us out there or Facebook page.
Cool.
Check
okay,
your
Jordan.
You can follow me on Instagram at JordyLocks. Also, check out ATC Gaming. That stands for Alive Through Christ Gaming. We're on Discord. We're on Star Citizen. We're on Facebook. It's a clean Christian gaming community. You can have these kind of discussions and not be ridiculed, mocked, or you can just game and have fun. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and we're also on Twitter, I believe. That's it for me.
Cool. Okay, and... Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was going to move on to the next person. What are you saying?
I was just going to say the benefit of that gaming community is that if somebody says something they don't agree with and they're playing Battlefield, they can shoot them.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And it'd be
right.
appropriate.
I'm sure that everyone wishes that we were playing that game right now.
Your theology sucks, noob.
Jordan, I'm sure you would love if I joined that server, so you could shoot me.
I can shoot you in real life. I don't need a server.
Okay, well, got real life. It's
I'll
like
buy you a beer and cigar. I'll poison you slowly.
my camera, am I right? Got him.
No.
Okay. Andrew.
Yeah, I don't have that much of an online presence, but if you want to follow me on Instagram, I don't post very often, but it's me B Fletch. Me B FLETCH.
Woo.
Cool. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for making this very insanely complicated, full podcast fun and interesting. Everyone participated, I think, very well, and I am excited to hear what people think of this episode. Remember, everyone who is listening, you can follow us on Instagram at WAITSB Podcast and send us direct messages or DMs, as the kids say.
Slide up in there.
Slide into them.
You can send us those. We would love to hear opinions. We really are trying to look to get some more engagement. We had a bunch of people voting on whether or not they were on predestination or determinism or free will. And so
What was
I would
our audience?
love to... What?
What side was our audience on? Were they on predestination or were they on free will? What was the majority?
So I did two different polls. The first poll is 43% predestination and 57% free will.
Wow,
and
it's
I-
a bigger
let me see
split
if
than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, let me see if I can find... There was another... I gotta remember how I can get to the past. Let me see if I can get into this.
How do I get to
I
the
don't know if I
past?
can get to it fast enough. Well, like I can... There's a way on Instagram to see your past stories, and I don't remember where it is, though.
When I voted on that one, it was like 87% free will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was something like that. Okay. So follow us on Instagram. I would love to hear if anybody changed their mind after listening to this podcast. That would be fun.
That would be amazing if we changed someone's mind today. I mean, we solved it, but people still might not believe us.
Destination for the win.
Total influencers, so I'm pretty sure
Yeah, okay.
everyone's mind will be changed.
So we need to wrap this up. Follow the Instagram, guys. Oh, my plugs. I didn't do my plugs.
Oh, yeah.
Follow
Luke,
me
who
on
are you?
Instagram at Luke Roxwold, LukeRockswold. I'm posting a lot of pictures, stories, interesting videos, trying to be funny. People seem to really like my Instagram right now, so I'm excited. Follow me on there. Check us out, guys. Listen to our other episodes. That would be great. Thanks for listening. Oh, and I didn't tell you this, Andrew. At the very end, we all say outro music together. So everybody that's ready, 3, 2, 1, outro music.
Outro music.
Okay, stop. All right, everybody stop recording.